God's Not Dead ran 2 hours and 8 minutes. I did not watch this 10 years ago when it came out in 2014. Man, it's crazy how fast time flies. Hercules and Superman from the 1990s, so Kevin Sorbo and Dean Cain, these two guys' shows were among young Oz's favorites. As things play out behind the credits, this movie shows off so many characters, almost potentially too many. When Dean Cain's Mark speaks for the first time, I instantly realize he and Kevin Sorbo are both playing heels, or bad guys. I didn't see that coming. Amy, Mark's girlfriend, is calling him to get help with directions to a church so she can ambush Duck Dynasty people. I never got into that show. Is it still popular? I don't know. Or is it even still on? Not sure. So many characters have been shown, and so quickly, I'm not clear on who nearly anyone is other than Mark and Amy, who are both clearly not heroes. We got a scene with a woman checking in on a dementia patient. It turns out it's her mother, so thankfully I know that about her at least. At one point, she calls Mark and establishes that her name is Mina and that she is his sister, so that's helpful. We finally get to the meat of the movie, the thing that was promoted within the trailers. Kevin Sorbo's smug professor, Jeffrey, invites students to leave his class while he is welcoming them to the start of the year. The movie really enjoys cutting away while the professor was midway through his speech. We then go to an airport where a pastor named Dave is picking up his friend from a missionary trip. I think that's what was happening. Was the cut just done to show the contrast between the teacher and the preacher? I don't know. To move forward in the class, the professor wants all the students to write "God is dead" on a paper and pass it to the right as a way to get everyone on the same page. I find it mildly surprising that only one student doesn't play along. Josh Wheaton is the one student. Professor Jeffrey is not happy, but is willing to allow Josh to make his case over the next few weeks. Of course, Jeffrey has a big ego, so he assigns an additional book for the class to read since Josh defied him. This is stacking the deck against Josh for everyone to be against him, or so it feels like to me, because nobody wants additional reading on top of all the reading they're already supposed to be doing. Josh's girlfriend thinks she is his boss, which is annoying. Back to Amy, who is now with the Duck Dynasty stars. Amy is a reporter for The New Left, and this interview or ambush is very weird. The exchange is just awkward. She is making it out as if the family praying on TV is somehow, I don't know, insulting to viewers. The big bearded guy makes a very logical point. No one is forced to watch the show. She also has issues with them killing ducks because food is bad or something. I don't know. This whole part doesn't work for me. As if we didn't already have enough characters or storylines with student versus teacher, lawyer versus sister, also lawyer versus girlfriend, and preacher with a mission trip pal. Why not introduce a new storyline? We had not nearly enough, I guess. Outside the college, a very stern father drops off his daughter, who is wearing a headscarf, who, once he pulls away, she takes it off. It feels like the makers of this movie didn't realize they'd get 4 additional movies, and they said, we must put every idea we have inside this film because it might be the only one that ever gets made. Legit, the trailer made the movie seem much more straightforward, basically just the student defying the teacher. And on that subject, the main student, Josh, has bumped into Aisha, the girl who took off her head covering, when she is away from her father. And a couple of times now, in the school cafeteria and outside of the nearby church, is it possible she and Josh will be getting together? Because I do not like his controlling girlfriend and her controlling father, so potentially you could put these two together and they could both get away from controlling characters. That might be something. Not a fan of how much this thing can't stay in a scene. After Preacher Dave walks up to Josh, we go back to the Duck Dynasty stuff, only for them to invite the reporter into church and for her to decline, and then the movie goes right back to Josh and Dave. Josh wants reassurances that he has made the right decision, and the pastor gives him scripture recommendations to read. Dave is potentially the most well-written character, which makes sense because I assume whoever wrote this gets his perspective. When Josh reads the biblical passages, he knows he is doing the right thing, even though his girlfriend, who wants to control his life, tells him he isn't. Back to Amy and that new left reporter. I don't like how she has treated people who clearly, I'm not supposed to like her attitude. I mean, I get that, but it bothers me. And so, I guess, well done by the actress. That makes this scene where she is at her doctor and in a rush extra crazy, because she gets diagnosed with cancer and her response is, "I don't have time for cancer." And I could seriously see myself saying something of that similar nature, because I can remember before I finished my first graphic novel, well, and by before, I mean, while it was at the printer, I just kept thinking, I was like, God, don't let me die yet. I'm not where I need to be in the process of getting the project done. Josh and his girlfriend have been together for 6 years, but if she has been like this controlling attitude the whole time, I have no idea how he has put up with it. Josh bought them both tickets to see a band in concert, the same band, in fact, where they met one or each other at, and she's still being very pushy about wanting him to just write God is Dead and get the A and move on. Why does she think that she can control him so easily? I don't get it. As a matter of fact, the girlfriend and the professor are not all that dissimilar, because Professor Jeffrey, who is smug, and Kevin Sorbo does a good job at it, wants to make decisions for not just Josh, but every student, just like the girlfriend does. Josh is so awkward when he stands up in front of the class defending God, especially since he must follow Jeffrey, who is very experienced in public speaking and already has credibility since he is the one giving everybody the grade. It's almost like it would be outside the student's best interest to even think about siding with Josh as opposed to siding with Jeffrey, the teacher. It's very interesting to me that Josh quotes folks saying how that the Big Bang Theory, not the TV show, was originally looked down upon since scientists at the time felt it pointed towards a creator. And, it is kind of like God said, let there be light, and there was light, and it was good. As a general idea goes, because bang, here it is. So, yeah, it's not something you typically think about, because usually when the concept of Big Bang is mentioned, it's done in a scientific and not biblical sense. Josh does pretty all right with his first presentation. Both the theist and the atheist must answer the same question. How did things come to be? The professor laughs at the student, and his ego is just boundless. I was shocked that after the class, Jeffrey confronts Josh. It felt off that his ego would get bruised. The dumb girlfriend has broken up with Josh, and what a blessing that is for him. Oh no, Aisha's little brother, who was just messing around with her, took her, iPod, I'll say for the sake of argument, some sort of MP3 player type device. It wasn't a cell phone. And he finds out, the little brother does, that she was listening to Franklin Graham, and she freaks out, begs him not to tell their father. After this, we see Dean Kane's Mark meet with Amy for dinner, and both have news. He says he made partner at his law firm, and she says that she has cancer. As if we didn't already know that Mark was the bad guy. Mark breaks up with Amy. He's so upset with her for stepping on his moment, which is ridiculous because, no offense to anybody, but if the person you're with has cancer, whatever good news you got, taking a back seat to their bad news. Back to the main story at the college library, one of Josh's classmates, his name's Martin, asks him why he is doing what he is doing and why try to prove God exists, and Josh simply says he doesn't want to disappoint God. I actually get surprised that that scene is allowed to play out so uninterrupted, because being in one place seems like a challenge for this movie. So of course we must jump to Pastor Dave and his missionary pal named Jude, attempting to go on a trip, only their car will not start. It seems like Dave is not meant to be departing just yet. Mina, Mark's sister, calls him, and it turns out he isn't just mean to, well, his ex-girlfriend now, but Mark is not nice to his sister or his mother either. As Mina gets off the phone, it is revealed that she is dating Professor Jeffrey, and things are beginning to connect, which is good because I just didn't know what was going on. But now that all roads seem to be converging into a nice, neat package, I'm glad that the stories aren't disconnected like they felt like they were in the beginning. Mina and Jeff are a very contentious couple. She is a believer and he obviously is a non-believer, but also his ego is just so humongous. I can't imagine that she'll stay with him long, or why she stay with him this long. The movie cuts back to Pastor Dave and his friend having more car trouble. I get it. He is needed here. No need to hit me over the head with it. Kevin Sorbo is having all his smart friends over, and while he is telling them all about his student who believes he can prove God exists, Mina, who Jeffrey treats more like a staffer and less like a partner, interjects and declares that she is a believer, which, Jeff already knows, but doesn't want to acknowledge. I love when Mina finally stands up for herself because the professor is super rude to her, saying something in another language, and one of his buddies says, "Seems like it is all Greek to her," which makes me assume that he's speaking Greek. I am so looking forward to Mina leaving him. We check in with Amy for a second, and she is petrified of cancer, which, makes sense. It feels like it is the next day, or at least sometime later, and Mina literally bumps into a lady at a coffee shop, and wouldn't you know it, Pastor Dave asks her if she needs to talk. Her reply is interesting. "Are you hitting on me?" And his response is even better. "I don't think I am." It feels like Pastor Dave is going to be the glue that ties all of these characters together. He already has been in connection with both Josh and Aisha. Now he has spoken with Mina, who has connections to Jeff and Mark. I think now everyone has been intertwined within the story. Dave gives Mina clarity on why she takes Jeff's negativity, but she has to be done with him, right? Or at least hopefully soon. Back in the classroom, and Josh quotes Charles Darwin, "Nature doesn't jump," and my instant thought is, nature may not jump, but this movie sure does. After class, the professor quotes the book of Job to Josh and reveals that his mother was a believer, but God took her from him when he was only 12. This scene is what got me. Kevin Sorbo laid it all out to Josh, and everything finally is clear. Jeff has chosen not to believe in God because he blames God for the loss of his mother at that young age. At Aisha's house, and her father now knows that she was listening to Franklin Graham because of her brother. The dad is so violent, and this is just painful. But pain seems to be the name of the game. Cancer, the death of a mother, dementia, and now Aisha has been disowned by her father for accepting Jesus. It is clear we are coming to the end. Not only have things become clear and quite understandable, but Josh is getting through to the other students. Mina comes to the college and breaks it off with Jeffrey, who is so in love with himself that he requests she call him Professor Radisson while on campus. After that, he doesn't allow her to break up with him, as if he has any say in it. Amy writes an article for the New Left website, and she reveals that she's got cancer and that she is losing her mind, feeling so alone. Yep, pain is definitely what everybody has got going into the finish, because Aisha goes to church questioning if she did the right thing, converting, and yeah, everybody's just going through it. Josh makes the argument that Professor Radisson isn't just an atheist, but he is anti-theism, because he isn't satisfied unless everyone believes like he believes. And Martin, one of Josh's classmates, the one he talked to in the library, stands up and renounces the fact that he wrote God is dead on that first day and declares that God is not dead, title of the movie. This inspires other students to also stand and proclaim that God's not dead. The movie then cuts to Mark, who is sitting talking to his mother who has dementia. Mark, like Jeffrey, blames God for the state his mother is in, and she, with just a flash of certainty, lays out why Mark has life so easy and why she doesn't, until she gets confused again, and it's real sad stuff, because Mark believes he's in the right because his life is smooth, and she can't be right because God allows her to be in pain. Every scene since Jeffrey revealed why he is against God has been powerful, and this next one is heartbreaking. The professor is at home alone, reading a letter from his mother that she wrote to him before she died. He then tries to call Mina, who, well, she doesn't answer, and he has no luck. Jeffrey goes to find Mina. She is going to be with other believers at a concert. It turns out it's the same concert that Josh had bought tickets for he and his girlfriend to go to, and Martin and Aisha are also here. Yeah, and oddly enough, Amy, the New Left reporter, is also at the concert. Amy is trying to get the band to explain why they believe, but when the drummer calls her out, she reveals that she has cancer and that they want, and all the band want to pray for her. At the same time, it is shown that the pastor and his pal are stuck in traffic because the car finally started, but now they just can't get out of town because of the concert. Jeffrey tries to win over Mina, but she chooses God over Mr. Fancy Pants Smart Guy, and Jeffrey is walking away. He gets hit by a car, and it is shocking but well executed. He doesn't die instantly, and Dave, along with Jude, check on Jeffrey, and he quotes his mother's letter to Dave while he is dying, and Jeffrey accepts Jesus in his final moments. I'm mildly disappointed that the death of the professor wasn't where the movie ended, because it was just so well done. But the band plays a song with the same name as the movie and gives Josh, not by name but through reputation, credit for standing up for God, and Aisha gives Josh credit to his face, so that helps. I'm glad it wasn't just the band playing a song, but we actually did acknowledge the story. But yeah, you don't get better than the way that they killed the professor. Overall, it was it's crazy. It was all over the place in the beginning, but at the end, everything made sense, and it gets a good 4 out of 5 stars. Upon completing the movie, I have to ask, what didn't make the original cut? Because, yes, I watched the extended edition, and so with that, I have to wonder what wasn't in the original movie. Because while, yes, we had a lot of storylines, and it moved about a lot, I can't really envision anything not being there due to all of the stories eventually coming together. I hope that God's Not Dead 2, which came out in 2016 and ran 2 hours, 1 minute, can be as good or better than the original. Hello, Sabrina, the middle-aged not witch. Realistically, Melissa Joan Hart starring in this is cool, since Kevin Sorbo's character died in the prior film, and we must keep that 90s nostalgia alive and well. Martin and Dave have both returned. Oh, look, and Amy is here also. She is looking very healthy. Hopefully, she is cancer-free. Melissa Joan Hart's character's name is Grace, and she lives with her 82-year-old grandfather. Good presentation. I know it is early, but things do feel less rushed. We meet our new main student. Her name is Brooke. For a split second, I think that she looks familiar. Am I thinking of Aisha from the first film? No, Brooke. She is Erica Goldberg from the ABC show The Goldbergs. And unfortunately, Brooke lost her brother. He died recently. Brooke is struggling, and her parents want her to move on and just be okay. It's sad. Amy Ryan got the good news that she is cancer-free from her doctor. The Newsboys lead singer, I didn't catch his name, calls Amy, and I'm surprised Amy doesn't seem happy. Isn't this what we prayed for? That's what the lead singer guy asks her. And, I can see where it's coming from to be surprised about her being rather melancholy. This film feels way more in the moment than the first, which, in its defense, had a lot of work to do in setting up the world. Pastor Dave's missionary pal, Jude, pops in, and I'm glad to have him back. Grace is a teacher, but is a total 180 degrees different from the professor in the prior film. Sadly, Brooke is home when the Salvation Army comes to collect her brother's belongings, and her parents aren't around. One of the movers gave Brooke her brother's Bible because it fell out of a box. This will become important later, well, actually throughout, because Brooke didn't even know her brother had a Bible, and she sure didn't know that he kept notes within it. There's a very powerful line later where she, reading her brother's notes, feels as though she got to spend more time with him than she got to in real life. And that is such a valuable thing to have. We are at the catalyst moment. Brooke is in class and just asks Grace, isn't nonviolence what Jesus preached? This came up because of the Dr. Martin Luther King High School, which is where the Grace is teaching, talking about Mahatma Gandhi, and I'm sure the gift of her brother's Bible helped put the thought in Brooke's head. In context, the question and the answer seem rather harmless, but of course one of the students must tattle, so a kid texts that the no conversation happened. On the recommendation of Josh, our prior protagonist, Martin has arrived at the church where Pastor Dave works. He has questions. If I'm not mistaken, he has 137 questions to start with, which was amusing. I find it ridiculous that Grace is getting in trouble for merely answering a question. I mean, what did they want her to do? Just not acknowledge that the student had a question at all? Like, as if, I don't know, it's puzzling. Brooke also gets called to the principal's office and told not to talk to her teacher, which I also think is a weird school policy. Grace meets up with her union-appointed defense attorney. He is a public defender, so this kind of reminds me how that in other shows like Suits and whatever, they have to do pro bono work. So I don't know if that's precisely what's happening, but it feels that way. Grace references just how young her public defender looks, and he is upfront and honest. He is low man in the office, and no one else wanted to touch this case. The school is laying back and having the ACLU go after Grace, and whatever they decide, the school will enforce. But it is obvious and dumb that the school want to fire Grace. The school is so cowardly. Also, whatever happened to the ACLU saying, I might disagree with your speech, but I will fight and die to protect it? Wasn't that kind of their stance in the past? Before things get to the court level, the defense attorney is trying to see if things can be solved at the school board level. Tom Endler, played by Jesse Metcalf, thinks that he just hit the jackpot. All Grace needs to do is apologize and commit to never mentioning Jesus again, and boom, it all ends. Grace can't do this, and Tom is shook. He thinks that this is a great deal and she gets to go back to teaching like she wants to, but Grace knows this isn't how her story ends. So they turn down the deal. Back to Pastor Dave and Martin, who is now leaving Dave's office. It's revealed that the movie, while it came out 2 years after the first film, in the narrative of the story, we're only a few months removed from what had taken place in the first movie. It is both helpful and interesting. I'm also not sure how cancer treatments work, so perhaps you do only need a few months to send it into remission. I don't know. Brooke's parents are being manipulated by the ACLU prosecutor guy. He has convinced them that if they go after Grace, it will help Brooke get into an Ivy League college. That feels nuts to me, especially if it's true. The prosecutor, Peter Kane, is literally comparing Grace's faith to a disease, something like smallpox or polio. He believes that public displays of religion should be wiped away. The courthouse is so pretty. Pastor Dave has been summoned for jury duty. I like that this connection is happening to get Dave tied to the new story and the new characters. Speaking of new characters, the judge for this case is Winston Zeddemore, or, more accurately, Ernie Hudson, who's playing Judge Stennis. Talk about nostalgia. Another film and another Duck Dynasty reference. Due to me not having any interest in that show, I struggled to even know if the show was still relevant in 2016. But whatever. It was just a small nod to the prior film, so no harm. Prosecutor Kane has used all of his exceptions while picking jury members, but still attempts to get Dave kicked off of the potential jury. Thankfully, defense attorney Tom ends up standing up for Dave, and the judge sides with our heroes. After her cancer-free diagnosis, Amy Ryan is struggling to feel God, and that's heavy. When next we see Pastor Dave and Martin, Dave reassures him that even though he doesn't feel like it is, having all these questions is actually a really good thing. The more Martin learns, the more he wants to learn. And Martin feels like one of the most genuine people within the franchise. Although I guess I'd have to admit that even the bad people also do feel real. Dean Cain, Kevin Sorbo both felt believable in the first film. And to clarify, what I mean by believable is their attributes felt like things that real people demonstrate, whether it's anger or selfishness, those types of things. Prosecutor Kane is such a dick. He hates what Grace stands for and feels so foreign to me that, hating Grace's positivity, it just feels almost, he's the most distant villain, I'll say that. The opening statement is such a manipulation, going on about separation of church and state, not clarifying that when that statement was made, it was meant to tell the church that they were going to be protected from the state's overreach. Kane also oversimplifies everything, which is frustrating, and he lies saying that all Grace needed to do was apologize, but she also needed to never speak of Jesus, which would be something that loomed large. I'm so grateful that Tom clarifies with the jury what I had already wrote, that the separation of church and state was written to protect the churches from the state's overreach. Chuck Konzelman and Carrie Solomon learned so much from the first to second film, the people who wrote this thing, and they just helped the flow better, and perhaps it could also come down to editing. So Vance Knoll did great work having the story play out smoothly. Amy Ryan has been sent the story, and now her writing is focused on her faith journey. This story, right up, it fits right into her new approach. Brooke is outside her school, non-violently protesting, which is very appropriate given how the whole thing started. When Amy can get the chance to talk to Brooke, this is the moment that really shows the actress's range, because in this moment, Brooke is nothing like the carefree Erica Goldberg. She is just real and raw and speaks clearly, and I'm big fan. Tom says to the jury in his opening statement that this is about facts and how that the state believes that these are dangerous facts. I really like this kid that's defender. After court lets out, Amy confronts Grace and inquires if it is worth it, and she replies, "I hope so." And that was an example of something I've long said, which is you're more likely to meet a steadfast atheist who will be so certain, kind of how Kevin Sorbo's character was in the first film, whereas meeting a Christian who, while yes, believe, will question whether they're making the right or wrong decision, which I've always thought was more believable in media. Grace, even in this moment when she is standing up for what she believes in, is still holding out hope that it's more hope than it is certainty. Pastor Dave is at brunch with other preacher friends, and they all have received sermon subpoenas from the court. I think this is completely unrelated to the school case, just another example of not all real separation of church and state stuff happening. The state wants everybody's business, including the churches. Somehow, a not insignificant number of the preachers plan on doing what Big Daddy government wants. Pastor Dave knows this request is not good and is wrestling with the idea of standing up and not folding. Grace tells Tom that her grandfather thinks she is on a date. It is very old people like when they're just going over the case, and yet he believes that she and Tom, who brought her Chinese food, are having a date. It's cute and amusing. If this was made by a non-Christian studio, I bet this would have turned into a date, or at least a hookup. But I like that they stay professional while also getting personal. And by that I mean it turns out to be very important to the finale, the conversation that the two have. But it is played down here to not give it all away. Martin's father has flown to America to inform him that he is a disgrace before striking his son. This is super not cool. Martin has been such a positive character, and his father acting so childish. It isn't as if his son has joined a gang or is robbing banks. I just don't understand why the dad is so dense. Like so many others in this time of need, Martin goes to seek Pastor Dave, but when he arrives, Dave is not around. I believe this is the movie's one big mistake. It is playing very somber music when Martin is in the church, seemingly alone, until he starts playing a piano. If they would have had Martin in complete silence before playing the music, I think it would have been much stronger. Maybe the audio messed up or the music placement, I don't know. Maybe there was a reason for having the music placed over it to try and hide some mistake. But it's very glaring, the issue that the music was playing before he started playing music. It turns out that Martin isn't alone. Brooke is in the church. With Pastor Dave unavailable, Brooke seeks to speak with somebody, and Martin is thankfully able to help in this moment. I'm a big fan of how Martin, having 137 or something about that amount of questions and seeking answers, has been able to use his knowledge to help others. When the prosecutor finishes it, it is now time for the defense to make their case, and they have a bold strategy, proving Jesus was a real person, thus making it a very appropriate thing for him to be spoken of in the history class. This is extra intriguing since Tom admitted to Grace that he isn't a believer, and that in his mind that is a good thing for him to not have a bias to her side. Tom also plans to use secular people to make the case, or at least previously secular people, I mean. Back at the church, Amy goes looking for Pastor Dave to find Jude instead. He is sweeping up the church since it is calming to him. Very strong stuff between Amy and Jude. He tells her that he is happy she hasn't put God or the idea of God back on the shelf after her cancer scare. Pastor Dave isn't giving the government the sermons. He did, however, write them a letter explaining why he isn't participating. The clerk who collects the letter is not happy. Amy has grown so much since the first film. She now, on the news, stands up for Grace, which is funny because in the previous world, she would have been working against her, I guarantee it. And the anchor pushes back because this isn't the Amy that she knows. Oh no, Pastor Dave collapses in court, and it I don't know if it's stress or what, but of course the prosecutor is so happy because he's a dirty guy and he thinks that this is going to help them win. Part of me wonders if it is the courtroom setting or just time and experience, but the team was the exact same from the first to the second movie, and this one just feels so much tighter, less disjointed. Brooke bursts into the courtroom and Judge Stennis, is mad, so Tom says the defense would like to call Brooke to the stand. This combination of Ghostbusters and Goldberg alumni are really making me a big fan of what's going on in the film. But the smug prosecutor twists up Brooke's words to make it seem as though Grace was in the wrong for answering about Jesus, even though I think it was Brooke's brother being the real reason she started down this journey. Grace fears she will lose the case, and Brooke thinks she ruined everything. We are certainly at rock bottom. Grace tells her grandfather usually she can hear God, but he has been silent. And Granddad tells her, as a teacher, you should know that teachers don't talk during the test. This is when Brooke and her friends arrive at Grace's home and sing hymns to help lift her spirits, which works because Grace hugs her grandfather and she doesn't seem defeated any longer. Martin goes to the hospital to check on Pastor Dave after helping Brooke. Martin now believes that God is calling him to become a pastor himself. Coming into the final days of court, Tom is late, but when he arrives, he is dressed up big time. Usually, he had been rather casual, but not today. Now, he looks the part. When the judge attempts to close down the whole proceeding, Tom says that he is calling Grace to stand, but she doesn't want to go. So Tom requests the right to treat the witness as hostile. In this moment, Tom is the man. He is no longer playing Mr. Nice Guy. Tom requests Grace apologize on the stand, but she still can't, and so he asks why. This leads to the reveal from Tom that Grace has heard God speak to her. She's afraid people will believe she is crazy, but Tom pushes the issue because he is playing the bad guy in this instant. After the reveal, Tom demands that the jury find her guilty so that they can root out all religion in public life. And here comes the money. Because we know all enforcement ultimately is through the barrel of a gun, Tom is great here. I am blown away that the Amy Ryan character in this is the Amy Ryan from the prior film. I was so irritated with her ego in the first movie, but here she is humble and kind. I find it funny. One of the things I thought I didn't want to continue was the Newsboys concert, because I thought that it felt just a little forced, but in the first film. But after Grace is found innocent, or at least not guilty, of wrongdoing, Amy and the lead singer of the band talk on the phone while he is on stage. I actually am happy that we did get that concert happening. This was just a great 5 out of 5 stars movie. Everyone played their part so well. Even Pastor Dave's alternate juror, the person who took his spot after his health scare, was a refreshing idea. The prosecutor even said to his team after they lost, Tom was smart by making everyone but Grace the bad guy, so as to make it clear to the jury she was doing what she thought was the best. Just like with the prior film, this one shows all the examples of the type of events that really happened, which inspired this movie to be made. And it was quite a large number of events. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular here at Mr. Super Oz, I just want to thank you for tuning in to the channel. It exists because I, Oz, from the channel Mr. Super Oz, I wrote a 68-page graphic novel called Everlasting Survivors. Volume 1 is called All Day Long. If you follow the link in the description of this video, you can get yourself hats, shirts, posters, all kinds of fun things. But most importantly, you can get the story itself. And the more people that pick up the story, the greater the chances are that there can be continued adventures with these heroes. If you could, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment, enjoy. Well, this is certainly going to be the longest solo video I've ever done. I'll try to get through the 3rd and 4th God's Not Dead movies faster than 1 and 2. A Light in Darkness, released in 2018, ran 1 hour 42 minutes. In the opening credit sequence, Pastor Dave is getting arrested for not following the court order to turn over his sermons from the last few months. Wonderful use of a part of a movie that usually gets looked over. I also enjoy it tying into the prior film. Well, the subplot of the prior film, that is. With the knowledge that the prior 2 movies took place within months of one another, I'm going to assume this is playing out in a similar fashion, since they do not directly tell us how long it has been since Dave was on the jury for Grace's case. Judd, Dave's best pal, the fellow pastor, bails him out of jail. On the way out of the jailhouse, the press is asking Pastor Dave all kinds of things, and he makes things even worse for himself when he proclaims that Jesus is the one truth. The news is losing their minds over this Christian preacher being allowed to proclaim that Jesus is the one truth on television. It is almost as if they are mad at themselves for allowing him to have their platform. Interestingly, while the media is going nuts and the college is freaking out, Dave and Judd are business as usual, just delivering food to those in need. Judd calls out Dave for not asking out Meg, a lady who is clearly into him, and if he had any doubt, he can't now. She wrote him a note that says how she has always had a thing for bad boys, making a joke of him being arrested. When Dave and Judd return to the church, it has been vandalized. The sign posting for parking says, "Go away." Unless my memory is failing me, and perhaps it is, I'm not a young pup. It feels like the first time that this church has had an actual church service within these movies, which is surprising given that it has been a part of all of the movies thus far. During the service, Judd is officially named the co-pastor of the church along with Dave. Well, Pastor David Hill. After these two are leaving the church, they hear a window break, so Judd goes back inside while Dave goes in pursuit of the person who damaged the church. It has been established already that this church has been around a long time, and later that it was also Dave's dad's church that he preached at before Dave himself preached here. I say all this because the brick didn't just break a window, it also busted a gas line, but, well, not the gas line itself, but a valve on the gas line. I believe that's what was the actual cause. When Judd turns on a light in this very old church, faulty electrical sparks, and with the gas that's in the air because of the busted valve, and there's a big explosion. Judd is in bad shape. I fear he's not going to make it. Dave gives up his pursuit and goes inside to try and save his friend. I was right. Judd doesn't make it. With his dying breath, he says a phrase to Dave in Swahili. We go back 12 hours earlier, and I'm not convinced that it is the right decision. Just, like, why would you flash back when you've got something so impactful? Yes, Judd dying was bad, but running backwards doesn't make it less painful. It just makes me feel like they are making a bad decision. Why not show whatever you wanted to show before Judd dies, so when that it occurs, we are forced to stay in the pain? Yeah, in the previous 12 hours, we are introduced to young punk kids, Adam and Keaton and a couple other college crybabies. Adam Keaton should have been shown when the news was talking down about religion. That would have fit better than what they're doing, because here Keaton is questioning God's existence and Adam is saying how he served his time as if going to church was a punishment. The so-called friends of these two also annoy me, talking about Kit Kat theories and other nonsense of the multiverse. Like, don't get me wrong, multiverse is fun for make-believe stuff. How is it more believable that parallel dimensions crashed into each other, making it so people think Nelson Mandela died in prison even though he didn't, or that Kit Kat had a hyphen between the two words even though they didn't, or like they just want to pretend like this is proof of there not being a creator to the world or the everything. I think a creator is basically the easiest thing to understand. Everything was made by someone or something. Thankfully, Keaton didn't enjoy this back and forth either, and this leads to her breaking up with crybaby Adam. Josh is back on campus. That's cool. I like how this feels like a real world. People come, people go, and people come back in, and, you know, this 12 hours earlier area has shown that Adam was so mad about the breakup, or maybe generically being rejected, he is seething, and this is what leads to him throwing a brick through the church window, and unfortunately we know that's what causes Judd's death. It just, everything feels so out of place with how that it has aired. And, like, okay, so I understand being creative, I understand trying to do something different, but this does, what it, to me it does is it devalues Judd's death by, again, escaping it, going backwards, having him stay alive, that type of thing. David's really being put through it. Him getting thrown in jail, his best pal dies, and now his church is being seized by the college. Obviously, one of these things is much more important than the other two, but still hard times. The fate of the physical church must take a backseat to the funeral for Judd. Everything is just sad at this funeral, but that's to be expected. Tom, one of the college board members, comes to face to face with Dave, and I'm glad that it was not hostile. It is revealed Judd's last words to Dave are the most common thing that they said to one another in the prior films, which is God is good all the time, and then all the time God is good is what they would say to one another. And it was very powerful that his final statement in his native tongue is also the thing that Pastor Dave and Pastor Judd had most in common. When Dave delivers food to Meg, while he is trying to keep everything normal, things are very abnormal. They are not playful like before. Everything is just so unpleasant, which is, accurate to how things are when someone you care about dies unexpectedly. Tom Ellison, that university representative, breaks the news to Dave that his church is no longer welcome here around the campus, and that the building will be taken down and turned into a student center. This is the church Dave's father preached at, so this is just devastating to Dave. The school is using eminent domain as a justification to do this. Thankfully, Josh was in law school, but he doesn't know how to save the church. Josh uses Dave's own logic on him, and it may not be easy, but it is simple. You must stand up for God. This leads to Dave driving and meeting with a lawyer who turns out to be his brother, Pierce Hill, played by John Corbett. I really enjoy this guy's demeanor and his presence that he brings to the movie. I also liked his work in My Big Fat Greek Wedding and all the boys I've loved before on Netflix. John Corbett is just, he's just a guy who delivers. And I like that we're learning more about Dave and that he has a brother, Pierce. Oh no, Adam wants to talk to Keaton. He is so messed up because of his actions leading to Judd's death. This cannot be good. When Pierce gets to Dave's house, he asks if you'd like a drink, and Pierce replied, "Got any booze?" So clearly these two brothers are not the same. My goodness, the brothers are so disconnected that Dave doesn't even know that Pierce had a triple bypass surgery. Sad. Dave, who usually thinks he has the answers, is telling his brother what he thinks he should do when Pierce tells him that you should just defend yourself if you know what's best. That's a very good brotherly back and forth. I'm glad the brothers aren't always arguing. When they go into the crime scene, so the church, Pierce points out where he had carved his name in a pew. They remember how much trouble this caused. Tom Ellison is getting his position threatened by the other members of the, college board thing for wanting them to be kind to Dave. All he really wants is to offer Dave and the church more money to relocate, which, seems fairly reasonable. Pierce messes with Dave by asking if he still prays for him. Faith, or perhaps Pierce's lack of faith, is why these two brothers aren't close. Adam wants to tell the truth that he did cause the gas valve to break, but, and that being what sparked the fire. But ultimately, he knows that what he did led to the death of Jude, but it wasn't by intent. At the same time, Keaton is worried about him coming clean. Adam now wonders if the God that he was so against that he threw a brick through a window will forgive him. So was it more that Adam was mad at God and less that he doesn't believe in God? Because how can you be mad at someone who you don't even think is around? The college is being bold and attempting to demolish the church on a Sunday morning. That doesn't seem like a mistake. Pierce tells Dave to stall for time, so he starts reading the Bible in the beginning. Pierce is racing to get a judge from across town that's even at a different church. That's a smart move. Good job, big brother. Pierce got the cease and desist from the judge and is able to keep them back off from St. James Church. So Dave has 3 weeks to make his case. The contentious nature of this brotherly relationship is one of the high spots because I can't say I am a fan of the Adam and Keaton storyline, and when Keaton checks in on the progress, Dave feels the least pastor-like so far, hoping that whoever did this pays. I don't quite get what caused Pierce to fall away from his faith, but he seems moved when he sees that Dave still has the Bible that his parents gave him. While talking about his brother, Dave says Pierce made Christianity cool. Maybe he should say that to his brother instead of about his brother. Dave wishes Pierce would have come back to the faith before their parents died, but he didn't. Both brothers feel wronged by each other, and it is very unpleasant. I did say I was going to try and keep this brief, or more brief than the first 2 movies, so I'll say this. Adam reveals why he was against the church, and it's because his mother was rejected for leaving his father, who was violent, and that just feels unlikely in the modern age, but in its defense, perhaps it's a church that I'm unfamiliar with. In any event, Pastor Dave decides to stop fighting for St. James or the past. He does allow the college to build their student center when they agree to let Josh keep the community that they have built there up and running. And then Dave opens a St. Jude church, I assume not far away, and generally around where Meg has shown Dave her church outside of church, which is a very pleasant part of the area. There were ups and there were downs. Generally speaking, I give it a passable 2 out of 5. Again, if the story would have played out narratively the way that the 2 prior did, which is in chronological order, I think I would have been much more forgiving. But with the time jumping backwards and trying to separate it from Jude's death, I feel like 2 out of 5, or passable, is as good as this gets. God's Not Dead, We the People, released in 2021 and ran 1 hour, 32 minutes. Starting with Ronald Reagan giving a speech was unexpected, but having Pastor Dave pop up in our nation's capital, a little less surprising. He is here to help some families going through a lot of hard times from Big Daddy government. Martin is back in America and he is hanging out with Aisha. This feels like it could be a direct sequel to the original movie, since the second film barely had connection to the first, until Dave got summoned for jury duty. We rewind back before the Washington, D.C. trip, and Dave stops into a homeschooling family co-op to give a theology lesson. Of course, the state must send a lady to ensure that the crazy homeschooling people are doing it like the government wants. The Department of Education representative is so awkward when one of the kids wants to know if the lady would like to be called Mrs. or Miss or whatever the woman prefers. The lady is so anti the biblical lesson being taught to the kids, and it is obvious. We begin to set up a secondary story with a kid named Jackson who is super traumatized by the death of his father. He hates when his mom is away. He is worried that Taylor, his mom, will one day leave and never return. Because that's how he perceives his father's death. It's sad times. After this, we set up a third tier story. We the People is big time feeling like the exact follow-up to the first film. So many stories being jammed in. The third story is about the eldest son of the primary family in the co-op wanting a car. While, yes, Martin and Aisha are basically attached to the Dave story, since he is working with the families, they are also not directly a part of the co-op. So now I'm wondering if it is more than three major storylines going on. So one being the family versus the government. All right, I'm with it there. That's definitely the primary one. Two seems like the devastated son Jackson, who is connected because his mom is helping out the co-op because they are teaching him because he's scared to, I don't know, be out maybe out in public. Brandon McKinnon wanting his car and falling for the girl Kayla Neely is the third story, but we already know that he is connected to the primary story because he's, the eldest son of the main family. The fourth story with Martin and Aisha fighting for the American that the rest of the world believes exists, because if America isn't an option for freedom of speech or religion, no one has anywhere else to go. While Martin and Aisha show up to support Dave with the homeschooling family co-op, the outsiders, the non-family members, can't believe that they don't have the freedom to teach their kids what they believe. When this gets brought up, all the parents have multiple examples of why that they do not want the kids in the school system. Mike and Rebecca McKinnon use an example of birth control being talked about at a very early and inappropriate age. I'm impressed that the makers of the franchise have Dave being cautious due to the events of the prior film. The parents wanting to fight back makes Dave think of him standing up for what he believed in and then landing himself time in behind bars. I'm sure Dave is not a huge fan of being in court, especially since Judge Neely and the social worker seem to believe that they know better than the parents do. If the co-op doesn't teach exactly what the school would have taught, then the kids could be forced into going to the government-approved school. Dave speaks in court, and it probably isn't a great idea. Pastor Dave isn't even one of the parents, and the social worker and the judge seem to see religion as the enemy. Judge Neely especially feels militant in the idea that government knows best, or in some way has the kids' best interest, when realistically, the parents for sure know and care for the kids, whereas the government, or the people representing the government, just seem delusional in the idea that they know what's best. Aisha is crying in St. Jude's Church because she'd do anything to be with her family once again, and it gives me an uneasy feeling, because narratively, this makes me think that she might not make it out of this movie, knowing that they already killed off Jude, that they killed off Professor Jeffrey. I was like, oh my goodness, her being so, I don't know, devastated makes me think that there's a chance that she might not make it out of this. The church also has an uplifting scene where Pastor Dave remembers Pastor Jude helping him with a sermon, and Jude is sorely missed here in this. He was always so reliable when people needed help. The memory of Jude was him reminding Dave that to whom much is given, much will be required. With that, Dave is now ready to stand up with the families and defend the parents. And the co-op, they remind Dave that they're going to be court costs and fines and things if things don't go their way. But Dave, who believes in the cause, says that the church will pay. I was kind of surprised by how many countries have prevented the concept of homeschooling. Martin says China banned it, and Pastor Dave and the parents go to Washington to try and prevent America from being the next to ban parents from teaching their children. Brandon offers to give his parents the money that he had saved up for a car, but his dad turns him down. Martin is joining Dave and the parents on the trip to the Capitol. Since the parents didn't take Brandon's money, he buys a car from a girl that he is clearly into. Martin and Aisha being close is cool, but she reaches out to her father when Martin is unable to text with her. And it's sad stuff because obviously her family is still disowning her. The father being so cold towards her is one of the things that makes me fear for her life, because losing his daughter might change his perspective. Speaking of that, Jackson's father didn't die in a war, but rather in a training accident. So no wonder the kid is scared that his mom will be out just doing normal daily things and not come back. And I mean, that's terrible that he has that experience. Brandon and Kayla, the girl that he bought the car from, they really help lighten the mood, because without the teenage storyline, this thing would be basically all down or all the time. Mike and Rebecca, the parents of Brandon, not being allowed to teach their kids as they choose, and Taylor not knowing how to help her son. Yeah. Brandon is so genuine, and it helps to be out in the wild with his new lady pal, who is rather jaded when it comes to the whole school and culture thing, whereas Brandon, he longs for normal, which she has in excess. I think it's because it just makes such storyline sense, but I knew even before they revealed it that Kayla was going to be the judge's daughter. That interconnectivity of each story is so much of the foundation this franchise has built itself on. So many characters ended up in the same Newsboys concert in that first movie that it just felt right that the girl Brandon would be into would be the daughter of the judge. Martin being a forever optimist is so beneficial to him being at this DC hearing. Dave goes to meet with Congressman Smith, and it's the night before that big dog and pony show they're all showing up for. Daryl, the congressman, is the person who invited the families to come fight and be heard. In the Common Core curriculum, there is no truth. That isn't a very reassuring open from those against the co-op. Everything is relative. My biggest disconnect in this movie is how naive Dave is acting. Shouldn't he already distrust the government, since basically they're the ones who locked him up previously? After the first day of the hearings conclude, we get a montage of what is happening all throughout the different storylines. And wouldn't you know it, Oz was right. Aisha gets plowed by another vehicle as she is driving. I'm not sure if she's dead, but she sure isn't in good shape. That much is certain. Senator Robert Benson is not playing fair, and it truly feels like the government is trying to outlaw homeschooling, or at least independent thought associated with homeschooling. Like, oh, you can teach a kid as long as you do exactly what I say, sort of thing. It might be a bit of my personal bias, since I was homeschooled from 6th until 12th grade, but because not just myself, but friends and family currently homeschool kids, I know that the fact is the parents are 100% the ones who actually care for the children, not the big bureaucracy of government. Dave passionately states, if God is for us, who can be against us? And hilariously, although somewhat not even funny, Congressman Daryl Smith he says possibly the line of the movie when he says, in DC, literally everyone can be against you. And Brandon unintentionally lets slip that his parents are fighting what his new girl pal's mom, the judge, put on them in DC. And it's fun that the mother, the judge character, had instilled in the daughter character to always fight for what you believe in, so much so that when she finds out that her mom is the cause for her new friend's hard times, she tries to make the case for Brandon and his family toward the judge. The doctors don't know why Aisha won't wake up, And one of the doctors recommends to her father, who comes to check on her, that he ought to pray. And with this, he goes to the hospital's chapel. And in this area, at this point in time, Jackson, who struggles to eat with his mother away and is always scared, is also at the hospital. And like, I'm skipping over things because this video has gone way too long, but this is the defining moment of the movie when Jackson says to Aisha's father that he would trade places with his father in heaven to make his mother happy. And the father of Aisha, he is so maddened by Jackson's words. He even says to him, "Don't don't talk about this, because losing you would also hurt your mother." And it's in this moment that Aisha's father tells the young boy that God knows best. And it seems as if we're going to get a reconciliation of Aisha to her family. And eventually, because, again, the video has gone too long, eventually Kayla Neely goes to prom with Brandon McKinnon, and Judge Neely rips up the court papers that would have had the co-op have to be fined for not listening to the Big Daddy government stuff. Overall, it was a totally fine 3 out of 5 stars movie. My only thing is, it feels like a direct sequel to the second, ignoring the first, ignoring the second and third films to some degree. And overall, while that's fine, and again, the movie is fine, I hope that the next and 5th installment that will be reviewed next week on the channel in the current critique format, which is God's Not Dead, In God We Trust, I hope that it is as good as the second, or as good as the first, and possibly as good as the second, since I feel like God's Not Dead 2 is the best of the original 4 films. So come back next week and enjoy.